You're on the clock, time is winding down, and you don't know which player you want to pick right now. Everyone has felt it before. You start to sweat, your hands are shaking, time's winding down, and you end up picking the wrong guy. Let me try and help with that situation a little bit. Today's video is going to be all about picking the best player in every single round, 1 through 15. Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Today's video, I want to talk about the best pick that you can make in every single round, all the way from rounds 1 through 15. And not every single player is going to be available at every single spot. So maybe this is our chance to figure out who do we need to maybe take a round earlier than what the ADP says. And maybe I'll need to offer you up multiple players to keep an eye on as well. The ADP that we'll be discussing today is the ADP averaged out across several platforms. The two players that I want to target in round 1 the most often is Breece Hall and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right now, you can typically get both of these guys in about middle of the first round. Sometimes Breece Hall is gone in the first few picks of the first, but he has dropped into the middle of the first on a few occasions. And for Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going in that like 6, 7, 8, 9 area. So you could get lucky and get either of these guys depending on where you're drafting in the first. Breece Hall last season was an absolute monster, and he started a little bit slow and inconsistent. But by the end of the season, we saw why he would have been a top fantasy pick had it not been for the knee injury the year prior. And now he's going to be in a better offense. Breece Hall, absolutely to the moon. Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't have the type of upside that some other wide receivers in this round do, but he has the consistency. He is the focal point of this Lions offense, and it doesn't matter how many weapons they have, he continues to get his targets on a consistent basis. My best pick in round 2 is going to be Derrick Henry. There's still a lot of Derrick Henry doubters. People out there feel that he's lost a step, that he doesn't have the same burst or acceleration that he had when he was with Tennessee. And maybe it's just the fact that Tennessee sucked last year. Maybe their line wasn't that good. Maybe they were inconsistent on offense, and unfortunately that hurt Derrick Henry. When he was in his heyday and he was in his prime, he had guys all around him that were making plays. Primarily A.J. Brown at wide receiver, and then of course Ryan Tannehill was actually pretty darn good during that stretch. Now he's getting Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. He's got so many weapons around him that not only should he be ultra efficient even if we lose a few touches this season, but do we not think that he can't come close to the 15 rushing touchdowns that we saw this backfield score last season? Now my second option in the second round would be Isaiah Pacheco. He's getting a lot of love out of training camp right now, and he's being looked at as having more of a 3-down role than what he's previously had in his career. We know he's one of the hardest runners in all of football, that he's going to pick up those yards, and that in this offense, he has the ability to have big play potential every single time. But now we're going to add in some potential pass catching as well. Sign me up for Isaiah Pacheco in the second round. In the third round of drafts, I've been heavily investing in Mike Evans. This guy doesn't get enough love, and he's consistently looked at as being okay, but he's not included in the top tier of wide receivers like he should be. Yeah, he's a little big play dependent at times, and sometimes his volume doesn't match up with some of the other top tier wide receivers, but he made it work with Baker Mayfield last year. Do we really think that he's going to bust this season? I don't see it. At least 1,000 receiving yards in every single season since he entered the NFL. As your wide receiver 1 in the third round after going RB heavy, I'm absolutely invested as much as possible. But maybe in the first round, you did go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. You took your running back in round 2, and now you want another one because, like us, you love to get your running backs early. I'll take Josh Jacobs in the third round. I see lots of comments every single week about how Josh Jacobs isn't getting enough love. And it's not that we don't love Josh Jacobs, and it's not that we think Josh Jacobs is bad. It's just Josh Jacobs is Josh Jacobs. I think in the third round in Green Bay, everybody at this point realizes he's a really good value, and he could be in for a really good season. We don't have to hype him up. We don't need to try and convince anybody to draft him. In the third round, his ADP is super solid. Is your RB2? Absolutely a game-changing pick here. Now, let's say you drafted 2 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds. You need a second running back right now, and Joe Mixon or Kenneth Walker in the 4th round are absolute steals. Joe Mixon likely has a much safer floor this season, and I don't care what people say about Joe Mixon. The Cincinnati Bengals didn't get rid of him because they don't think he's any good or he's washed up. They got rid of him because they didn't want to pay him anymore, even though they ended up paying Zach Moss about the same. That's been the issue for the last couple of years. They wanted Mixon to take a pay cut. He did at one point in time. He didn't want to take another one, so they said, all right, see you later. We've got to try and sign Tee Higgins. So they moved on from Joe Mixon, and now he lands in what may be an even better offense this season. There's plenty of weapons to pass to. The defense is going to be keyed in on CJ Stroud all the time. Joe Mixon hasn't been super efficient over the last couple of years, but that could really change this season. Kenneth Walker has injury concerns. Over the last couple of years, he hasn't been the picture of health, and we need to keep him on the field a whole lot more often. But when he is on the field, he is one of the most efficient running backs in all of football. His big play potential matches some of the top draft picks that you can make at the running back position. And you're getting him at a 4th round discount because people are worried about Zach Charbonnet or a potential injury. But even with some of those injury concerns and possibility of missing time, Kenneth Walker has shown to be one of the most efficient running backs in all of football his first couple of years in the league. So even if some time does end up being missed, as long as you're really strong at the running back position, when you have Kenneth Walker, absolutely, he's going to put together really solid numbers for you. If he does end up missing some time, just have the backups ready to go so they can fill in nicely. In the 5th round, I am continuing to eat up as much David Montgomery as possible. And even with the news that Jahmyr Gibbs is dealing with a hamstring injury that likely won't affect the beginning of the season for him, it becomes even more important that we're grabbing David Montgomery in the 5th round. He truly has excellent RB2 value in the 5th round. This is crazy that we're able to get a guy like this so late in our drafts. I am getting him everywhere I possibly can because a lot of times I'm grabbing him as my RB3. And if he's my RB3, he's the perfect fill-in for the flex or your RB2 in bye weeks or injuries or anything else needed. And you know what? He's still going to have some low-end RB1 upside at times this season. Invest in David Montgomery. All right, in the 6th round, depending on what you've done at the running back position so far, we could either go with Najee Harris as our RB2 or RB3, or we could go with George Kittle as our starting tight end. Now, this video is being recorded quite a bit in advance, and Brandon Ayuk could be traded or sign a deal before this video is released. I'm actually moving into my new studio this weekend, and I need to record this in advance, so I've got a few days to get moved and get set up so I can get recording again. So my apologies if you're watching this right now and I make a comment about Brandon Ayuk and you're like, Kyle, that already happened. But let's just say Brandon Ayuk isn't traded. We know George Kittle's going to have some up and down weeks, but we know that he's still a big part of this offense, and scoring touchdowns and picking up big plays will allow him to be a top 5 tight end. But let's say something does happen where Brandon Ayuk is traded. Now the consistent targets for George Kittle are going to come, and that just means more upside and more safety for him. George Kittle may be one of the best investments at the tight end position that you could make this year. And then for Najee Harris, I mean, the guy I'm not super excited about in terms of his ceiling, but I'm certainly not passing on him depending on how your draft has gone so far. Now, if you already have 3 running backs and you're coming into the 6th round, I'm not drafting Najee Harris. I'll take Jalen Warren a little bit later as my RB4 instead. But if you're coming into the 6th round and you only have 1 or 2 running backs, then Najee Harris is your RB2 or your RB3 seems really, really good. He's going to give you a nice floor this season. Jalen Warren has a little bit more upside in my opinion, but Najee Harris could end up being super safe. And this late, if you still need an RB2 or an RB3, Najee Harris is not a bad pick at all. In the 7th round, if you decided to skip on a tight end so far, this is where I want to go with Jake Ferguson. Right here is where things will start to kind of drop off for the tight end position. If you don't want to spend up on one this year for like Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta, that's fine. I absolutely get it. Kind of the next best option is going to be George Kittle, and kind of the last line of defense is going to be Jake Ferguson. He's going to have a super solid season. He should hopefully be the #2 target in this offense right behind CeeDee Lamb this season, and he is going to have a little bit of upside. If the volume is there with him and he has the upside with it, then we definitely could see him being a top 5 tight end this season. Now, if Brandon Cooks ends up being the #2 target, maybe we see some of that volume come down and he's not nearly as safe as we would like, but he's going to make an impact in the red zone, and that's exactly what Dallas needs. Now, my next 2 choices in this round are teetering on being 7th or 8th round picks, but it's either Jaylen Warren or Rashee Rice. I had just mentioned a moment ago that with Najee Harris, if you're going to take him as your RB2 or 3, that's fine. If you come to Najee Harris and you already have 3 running backs, I would rather hold off, take somebody else, and then take Jaylen Warren here. Or you could end up going with Rashee Rice. Now for Jaylen Warren, he has a ton of upside. He's one of the most efficient running backs in all of football based on last season's metrics, and he's going to be in a 50-50 split with Najee Harris. If he's got better big playmaking ability than Najee Harris, then that means his ceiling is going to be a little bit higher on any given week. And for Rashee Rice, I've done a couple of videos on him. I love his ADP right now. I love where you can end up taking him, and as far as all of his legal troubles go, as of right now, it doesn't seem like anything is going to happen until this season is almost over or this season is over. For this year, we should be fine. And with those weapons on the outside, he may not see as much volume as we would like, but some of those efficiency issues that we saw last year could definitely creep up. And at the end of last season, he was a top 12 wide receiver. If Patrick Mahomes continues to look his way consistently, then he absolutely could have a little bit of a higher ceiling with a nice floor this season. Round 8 seems like a really good spot to start investing in quarterbacks. There's going to be a few guys here from round 8 and on that are going to give us a lot of value. People tend to overdraft quarterbacks every single season, and Brock Purdy could be a top 12 option in the 8th round or later. And I want to absolutely load my team up with skill position players, and then I'll take a quarterback with top 12 potential here in the 8th round with Brock Purdy. Once again, this video is being recorded a few days in advance of being posted, so if something happens with Brandon Ayuk, we would absolutely have to take a look at Brock Purdy again, because losing Ayuk would not be great for Purdy, and there might be a few guys that I would move in front of him. But as of right now, with Brandon Ayuk, love Brock Purdy as a top 12 quarterback. Brian Robinson for Washington doesn't get enough love in my opinion, and from what it looks like right now, Austin Eckler is not going to be cutting into many touches on the ground. Brian Robinson is going to be the early down back. Both of them are going to get some looks inside the red zone, and Austin Eckler will get some looks in the passing game. But there's only one thing that we can count on a weekly basis. It's 15 plus touches for Brian Robinson on the ground, where we're going to be hoping for 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 targets a week for Austin Eckler in the passing game. And if he doesn't get all of those targets, Brian Robinson is going to have a much better fantasy viable floor than what Austin Eckler will this season. And again, if something happens with Brock Purdy and you're not interested in him in the 8th round, I've got 2 quarterbacks in the 9th round that I'm investing in. Do you want the ceiling? Do you want the big playmaking ability? The games where a quarterback could win you the entire week? That's going to be Tua. Him and his offense there in Miami absolutely have the opportunity to be a top 5, top 3 quarterback every single week, but he's going to offer you some poor floors as well. We've seen it before where all of a sudden the Miami offense forgets how to score points, or they just don't look great and they disappear for the week. If you want more safety, it's going to be Jared Goff. He's going to be a fringe top 12 quarterback. He's going to have some top 12 weeks. He's going to have a lot of weeks where he ends like maybe 13 to 15. He's not going to lose a whole lot for you. And keep in mind, he plays indoors every single game this season, but 3. In the 10th round, let's go ahead and chase some upside depth for our team here. If you haven't been investing heavily in the running back so far, then it's going to be Chase Brown. Definitely a guy that could be the #1 running back in Cincinnati by the end of the season, a guy that could help on the ground and in the passing game. If you've been investing heavily in your running back so far and you need some depth at the wide receiver position, let's go with Jameson Williams. The videos out of camp look amazing for Jameson Williams right now. He looks bigger, he looks stronger, he looks like at the point of contact, he definitely is a guy that is much improved, and we know he has the speed. Volume-wise, it won't be there for him this season because there's guys ahead of him, but big playability will always be there, and he could be a guy that could put together some big weeks. You've probably noticed a trend here. I'm investing in quarterbacks late. I just can't skip on top tier running backs and top tier wide receivers to draft a top quarterback when I feel like I can get better value at the quarterback position later than what I can at those other positions. And Kirk Cousins is going to be a name that comes up here in the 11th round. But if you already have your quarterback, then let's throw a dart at J.K. Dobbins. The guy is just so good. He just can't stay healthy. And maybe this is his year. Maybe he has one of those stories like Dante Foreman coming back from the Achilles. Typically that doesn't work well for running backs, but Foreman hasn't been all that bad the last couple of years, and we know the Chargers are gonna run the football. If J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy, even if he doesn't provide you the same upside that he did while in Baltimore, the guy could still easily be a flex option in any given week. For the 12th round, Jakobi Meyers is moving back into the slot for the Las Vegas Raiders. I absolutely love that in PPR formats. In half PPR formats, he loses a little bit of his upside, but we're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit, and whether it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, I think they're going to be taking a look at Jakobi Meyers now that he's back in the slot, which is where he typically played back in New England. If we need running backs still, I got a couple of them. We could go with Chuba Hubbard, who looks to be the locked-in-stone starter right now, given the fact that Jonathan Brooks is going to be worked in slowly this season and may not end up seeing really a full workload until 2025. Or we could go with Rico Dowdle. Now, Zeke may still be listed as the starter right now, but so far this training camp, it's pretty clear that Rico Dowdle is the more explosive running back right now. We'll see what happens with the two, but I would not be shocked if before too long, Dowdle is the starter. In the 13th round, Jalen Wright has some work to do. He's going to need to have injuries happen or some ineffective play from either Devon Achane or from Raheem Mostert. But the second that Jalen Wright gets a shot in this Miami offense, it's game over, and he could end up being a great fantasy play the rest of the season. For me though, Jahan Dotson at the wide receiver position could definitely be a huge breakout this year. He's moving into the slot, and Cliff Kingsbury, who's the OC in Washington right now, absolutely loves his slot wide receivers. While he was the head coach in Arizona, there were times where his slot receivers were seeing 50, 60, 65% of the targets in any given week. He absolutely loves game planning for slot wide receivers, and Jahan Dotson's big playability could be huge from there this season. In the 14th round, let's take some dart throws here. Will Levis is a QB1. I'm not feeling that, but if you want a backup quarterback, I'm okay grabbing up Will Levis and definitely using him in much better matchups if you want to. Jaleel McLaughlin, he's got some depth chart players that he's got to work through to get significant touches, but his ability to work in the passing game and on the ground could lead to some significant touches later this season. And then taking a look at Xavier Leggett, if you need a big play wide receiver, he's probably not going to be consistent in that offense, but he definitely could have some big games. In the 15th round, I mean, there's not a whole lot of guys I'm looking at here. Kendre Miller was a guy that I wrote about in the draft guide this season, and unfortunately a hamstring injury has kind of left him behind and maybe even in danger of making the roster this year for the Saints. But if for some reason he gets healthy, he could definitely be a steal a little bit later on in the season. Keep an eye on Kendre Miller. We may not draft him right now, but taking a look at this area anyway, I mean, we're throwing darts and we're picking names that we don't even know if they will help. help. Yo, Headliner Nation, hopefully you appreciated all of the content in the video today as I broke down my best players to pick in every single round 1 through 15. Make sure you leave a comment down below and let me know, is there anybody you disagree with? Is there any guys in a certain round that you would rather draft over somebody else? And as always, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications. Anytime we drop new content, you'll know about it right away. But for now, Headliner Nation, I'm gonna get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.